Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the stars drift past the main screen. His ship had been traveling through the outer rim for 3 weeks now, mapping new systems for the Galactic Council. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and checked the time. Another 6 hours until his shift ended. The Horizon was not a big ship. She carried only 50 crew members and basic scanning equipment. Jake had commanded her for 2 years, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Council. Humans were still new to galactic politics, and they got the worst jobs. While the powerful Vorthak controlled hundreds of star systems, Earth barely managed 15. The other alien races looked down on humans as primitive newcomers. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Pete Rogers from the sensor station. "There's a large object ahead, but it's not on any of our charts." Jake walked over to look at the readings. The sensors showed a massive structure floating in empty space far from any star. It was at least 10 kilometers long and appeared to be artificial. "Any signs of life?" he asked. "None that I can detect, sir. But the hull material is unlike anything in our database." Dr. Lisa Martinez looked up from her workstation. She was the ship's xenoarchaeologist, responsible for studying alien artifacts and ruins. Lisa had joined the crew 6 months ago, fresh from Earth's best universities. She was smart, dedicated, and never backed down from a challenge. "This could be important, Captain," Lisa said. "We should investigate," Jake nodded. "Take us closer, Rogers, but keep our shields up and weapons ready." The Horizon moved slowly toward the mysterious object. As they got closer, the true size of the structure became clear. It was not just big, it was enormous. The hull was dark gray and covered with strange symbols that seemed to shift and move in the light. Tall spires rose from the main body, and massive docking bays gaped open like hungry mouths. "I've never seen anything like this," Lisa whispered. "The design is completely unknown. This doesn't match any of the 12 council races." Jake ordered a full scan. The results were puzzling. The station appeared to be very old, possibly thousands of years. But its technology was far more advanced than anything the council had ever built. Most mysterious of all, there were no records of any civilization capable of building such a thing. "Captain, I'm reading power signatures," Rogers reported. "The station is still active. How is that possible?" "This thing looks ancient." Lisa studied the scan results on her tablet. "The symbols on the hull, they look familiar somehow. I need to run them through our linguistic database." Jake made the decision to board the station. He selected a small team, Lisa, Rogers, and 2 security officers. They took a shuttle to one of the smaller docking bays, which opened automatically as they approached. The bay was filled with a breathable atmosphere and had artificial gravity. The interior of the station was just as mysterious as the outside. The corridors were wide and tall, built for beings much larger than humans. Soft blue lights came on as they walked, guiding them deeper into the structure. The walls were covered with more of the shifting symbols, and the air hummed with hidden energy. "These symbols," Lisa said, running her scanner over the wall. "They're not just decoration. They're some kind of data storage system." They reached what appeared to be a central chamber. It was huge, with a domed ceiling that showed a map of the galaxy. Stars twinkled and moved, showing the current positions of all known systems. In the center of the room stood a massive computer terminal, its surface covered with more symbols. Lisa approached the terminal carefully. As she got closer, the symbols began to glow brighter. Suddenly, a holographic figure appeared above the console. It was tall and humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin was pale blue, and its eyes glowed with inner light. "Welcome, children of Earth," the figure said in perfect English. "I am Sentinel Prime, guardian of this station. You have finally returned." Jake and his team stared in shock. "Returned?" Jake asked. "We've never been here before." The hologram smiled sadly. "Your people have been gone for so long you have forgotten your origins. But your genetic patterns do not lie. You are the descendants of the predecessors, the builders of this station and many others like it." Lisa's scanner was beeping frantically. "Captain, I'm reading massive data downloads. This thing is transmitting information directly to our ship's computers." Sentinel Prime gestured to the star map above. "Long ago, your ancestors ruled this galaxy. They built the hyperspace network that connects all inhabited worlds. They created the technology that the current council races still use today. But they were betrayed by those they trusted, hunted down and destroyed by the very beings they had elevated." The hologram's expression grew darker. A few of your people escaped to a distant world far from the core systems. They called it Earth. Over thousands of years, they forgot their true heritage. But the blood of the predecessors still flows in your veins. Jake felt his world spinning. That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossil records going back millions of years. Your scientists will find those records were altered long ago, Sentinel Prime replied. The predecessors wanted their children to be safe, to grow strong before the truth was revealed. That time has now come. Lisa was studying her scanner readings with growing excitement. Captain, the DNA sequences in these files, they match human genetic patterns perfectly, and these language roots, they're identical to ancient Earth languages that we thought had no connection to each other. Sentinel Prime waved his hand, and new images appeared in the air. They showed star charts with dozens of systems marked in red. These are the Lost Stars, a region your current council has declared forbidden. There you will find the true homeworld of your people, and the weapons they left behind. Weapons? Jake asked. The predecessors knew their enemies might one day threaten their children. They prepared defenses, ships, stations, and weapons more powerful than anything the current galaxy has ever seen, but only their true descendants can activate them. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Rogers checked his communicator. Captain, we're detecting multiple ships approaching. They're council vessels, a Zilani war cruiser and 2 Vorthak destroyers. Sentinel Prime's expression hardened. They have found us. The council fears what you might learn here. The Guardian turned to face Jake directly. Captain Morrison, you must choose. Will you flee and pretend this never happened? Or will you claim your birthright and fight for your people's freedom? Jake looked at his team, then back at the hologram. Through the station's sensors, he could see the approaching council ships. They were powering weapons and demanding surrender. In that moment, Jake realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just another minor species begging for scraps from the council table. What do we need to do? He asked. Sentinel Prime smiled. First, we defend this station. Then we wake the sleeping giants in the lost stars. The ancient station's weapons came online for the first time in millennia. Jake Morrison and his crew were about to discover just how powerful their ancestors had been, and how dangerous the truth could be to those who had built their empires on lies. The Zilani warcruiser fired first. Its plasma cannons unleashed beams of superheated energy that would have destroyed any normal ship. But the predecessor station was not normal. Ancient shields flared to life, absorbing the attack completely. The energy weapons that emerged from hidden ports along the station's hull were unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. The first blast from the station struck the Zilani cruiser dead center. The ship simply vanished, converted to atoms in an instant. The 2 Vorthak destroyers tried to retreat, but the station's weapons tracked them across space. Within seconds, both ships were gone. Dr. Lisa Martinez stared at the empty space where 3 council warships had been moments before. My God, she whispered. What kind of power is this? Sentinel Prime's holographic form flickered slightly. A small demonstration of what your ancestors could build? The council races have forgotten that they once served greater masters. Jake activated his communicator to contact the horizon. Rogers, get me Admiral Collins on Earth immediately. Priority Alpha transmission. Back on the ship, the crew was in chaos. The sensor readings from the battle were impossible to believe. Chief Engineer Maria Gonzalez ran diagnostics 3 times before accepting that the data was real. Captain, she said over the comm, our computers are downloading massive amounts of information from that station. Technical specifications, star charts, historical records. This is going to change everything. Admiral Frank Collins received Jake's transmission at Earth Defense Headquarters. He was a tough, experienced officer who had fought in the border conflicts with the Vorthak. When Jake explained what they had found, Collins sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Are you certain about this, Captain Morrison? Collins finally asked. Sir, I'm looking at proof that humanity are the descendants of the most advanced civilization this galaxy has ever known. The Council has been lying to us from the beginning. Collins turned to his aide. Get me Ambassador Sullivan immediately, and contact Dr. Alex Turner at the Quantum Research Division. If what Morrison is saying is true, we're going to need our best people. Word of the discovery spread through human space like wildfire. On Earth, crowds gathered outside government buildings demanding answers. In the colonies, human miners and farmers who had been pushed around by alien overseers suddenly stood a little taller. For the first time since joining the Council, humans felt hope instead of submission. Ambassador Kate Sullivan called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber on Nexus Prime filled with representatives from all 12 major races. Chancellor Vex of the Vorthak Empire listened to Sullivan's report with obvious skepticism. "These claims are absurd," Vex declared, his crystalline body glowing red with anger. "Humans are a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. The idea that they are connected to the mythical predecessors is laughable." Sullivan stood her ground. "The genetic evidence is clear, Chancellor. The technology we've discovered far exceeds anything in the current Council database." The Zelani representative, a tall being with large black eyes, spoke in a telepathic voice that echoed in everyone's minds. "Our war cruiser was destroyed by unknown weapons. This cannot be ignored." Chancellor Vex's tone turned threatening. "If the humans have discovered dangerous ancient technology, it must be confiscated for the safety of the galaxy. I propose immediate military action to secure these artifacts." Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was leading a small fleet toward the Lost Stars region. Admiral Collins had sent 6 ships, including the heavy cruiser UES Defiance commanded by Ben Taylor. It was humanity's largest military force ever assembled, though it would be considered tiny by Council standards. Dr. Lisa Martinez worked frantically to decode the predecessor data. She had made an incredible discovery. The symbols on the station walls were not just alien writing. They contained DNA sequences, mathematical formulas, and star charts all compressed into a single information system. It was as if the predecessors had embedded their entire knowledge base into their architecture. "Captain," Lisa said, bursting onto the bridge with her tablet, "I found something amazing. These aren't just star charts, they're activation codes. The predecessors built automated systems throughout the Lost Stars region. Shipyards, defense platforms, terraforming stations, all waiting for someone with the right genetic markers to wake them up. The human fleet reached the edge of the Lost Stars region without opposition. The area had been declared off-limits by the Council for centuries, supposedly because of dangerous spatial anomalies. But as they crossed the boundary, their sensors detected something else entirely. Commander Taylor was the first to see it. "Captain Morrison, you need to look at this." On his ship's main screen, a massive structure came into view. It was a space station even larger than the one they had found, surrounded by hundreds of smaller installations. And it was powering up. Ancient systems that had slept for millennia began to activate. Lights came on across the installations, revealing a vast industrial complex. Automated factories started producing ships using designs that were thousands of years ahead of current technology. Defense platforms swiveled to track the approaching human vessels, but their weapons remained powered down. Jake received a transmission from the central station. Another holographic guardian appeared on his screen, this one calling itself Architect 1. "Welcome home, children of Earth. We have been waiting for you to return." The Mew Guardian explained that this was just one of dozens of hidden installations throughout the Lost Stars. Each one contained the sleeping technology of the predecessors, waiting for activation by their genetic descendants. Ships that could repair themselves, weapons that could penetrate any known shield, and manufacturing systems that could build an entire fleet in days rather than years. Dr. Turner arrived from Earth aboard the research vessel UES Discovery. He was humanity's leading expert on alien technology, but what he found in the Lost Stars exceeded his wildest dreams. The predecessor computers didn't just store information, they could interface directly with human neural patterns, downloading knowledge straight into the user's mind. "It's incredible," Turner told Jake after his first session with the ancient systems. "They've left us the complete plans for rebuilding their civilization. Not just the technology, but the science behind it. With this knowledge, we could become the most advanced species in the galaxy within a generation." But the humans were not alone in the Lost Stars. A Vorthak spy ship had followed them, maintaining a safe distance while recording everything. When Chancellor Vex saw the surveillance reports, his anger turned to fear. The humans had found exactly what the Council had spent centuries trying to keep hidden. The truth was darker than Jake Morrison could have imagined. The current Council races had not simply inherited a galaxy from extinct predecessors. They had actively destroyed them. The Vorthak, Zelani, and other species had been servant races, uplifted by their generous masters. But power corrupted them, and they had turned on their creators in a galaxy-wide war of extermination. Only a few predecessors had escaped, fleeing to a distant world where they could hide and rebuild. Over thousands of years they had evolved and changed, becoming the humans of Earth. The Council knew this truth and had worked to keep humanity weak and ignorant, fearing the day their former masters might return. That day had now come. As Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the first newly constructed predecessor vessel, he realized that the balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift forever. The ship around him was a work of art and engineering that made Council technology look like primitive tools. Chief Engineer Gonzalez ran her hands over the control systems with wonder. "Captain, this ship doesn't just respond to commands, it anticipates them. The computer is reading our thoughts and adjusting systems automatically. It's like the ship wants to help us." The vessel was called Awakening, and it represented humanity's first step toward reclaiming their birthright. Its weapons could destroy any Council ship with a single shot. Its shields could withstand the combined firepower of an entire fleet, and its engines could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. But Jake knew that possessing superior technology was only the beginning. The Council would not give up their power without a fight, and they controlled thousands of worlds and billions of soldiers. The awakening of humanity's true heritage would soon lead to the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen. The attack on New Boston came without warning. General Sam Rodriguez was reviewing supply reports when the first orbital bombardment beam struck the colony. The Vorthak fleet had arrived during the night shift, bypassing all early warning systems with their new stealth technology. By the time the colony's defenses activated, half the city was already burning. Rodriguez grabbed his rifle and ran for the command bunker, but he knew it was too late. The Vorthak were not trying to capture the colony, they were trying to erase it. Their bombardment cannons fired continuously, turning buildings into glass and vaporizing everything in their path. 3 million humans lived on New Boston, and the Vorthak intended to kill them all. Captain Nicole Brown was in her fighter when the attack began. She had been testing one of the new predecessor designs, a sleek vessel that responded to her thoughts as much as her hands. When she saw the destruction below, rage filled her heart. Her squadron was outnumbered 50-1, but she did not care. "All fighters, this is Brown. Attack pattern Alpha. Show these monsters what humans can do." The predecessor fighters moved like nothing the Vorthak had ever seen. They twisted through space with impossible agility, their weapons cutting through enemy shields as if they did not exist. Brown's ship destroyed 3 Vorthak cruisers in the first minute of combat. Her wingman, Lieutenant Jeff Adams, took out 2 more with a single shot from his enhanced plasma cannon, but there were too many enemy ships. Even with their superior technology, the human fighters could not save New Boston. Rodriguez watched from his bunker as the last of his people died in fire and light. The Vorthak had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Any species that challenged the Council would be destroyed completely. The news reached Earth 6 hours later. Admiral Collins stood in the war room surrounded by his senior staff, watching the footage from New Boston with growing fury. Ambassador Sullivan had warned them that Chancellor Vex was planning military action, but no one had expected genocide. "How many survivors?" Collins asked. "None, sir," reported Captain Morrison, who had arrived from the Lost Stars aboard his new ship. "The Vorthak used planet-killer weapons. New Boston is gone." Collins turned to Dr. Martinez, who had been working with the predecessor archives. "Doctor, what weapons do we have available?" Martinez looked sick as she answered. "The archives contain plans for star-killer devices, Admiral. Weapons that can destroy entire solar systems, but using them would make us as bad as the Vorthak." "They killed 3 million innocent people," Collins said quietly. "Children, families, civilians who never hurt anyone. How many more will die before this ends?" The answer came sooner than expected. Vorthak fleets struck 5 more human colonies over the next week. Each attack followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force, total destruction, no survivors. The message was clear: surrender or be exterminated. But the attacks had an unexpected result. Minor species throughout the galaxy began to question Council authority. The Corvani, a reptilian people who had suffered under Vorthak domination for centuries, sent a secret message to Ambassador Sullivan. Their leader, High Commander Zek, wanted to meet with human representatives. Troy Mitchell was chosen for the mission. He was Earth's best diplomat, skilled at finding common ground between different species. His ship, escorted by two predecessor fighters, met the Corvani vessel at a neutral station in the Outer Rim. "Your people have shown courage," Commander Zek told Mitchell. "The Vorthak have ruled through fear for too long. Perhaps it is time for that to change." Mitchell leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "An alliance. The Corvani have suffered under Council rule just as you have, but we are not the only ones. There are dozens of minor species who dream of freedom. If we work together, we might have a chance." The Free Galaxy Coalition was born in that meeting. Species after species joined the alliance, each bringing their own grievances against the Council. The Bathari, whose homeworld had been strip-mined by Vorthak corporations. The Nixari, whose children were taken as slaves by Zelani telepaths. The Solani, whose ancient culture had been banned by Council laws. But the Coalition needed more than good intentions to face the Council's military might. That was where the predecessor technology became crucial. Admiral Collins authorized the construction of enhanced soldiers, humans who could interface directly with ancient battle systems. Dr. Susan Wright led the enhancement program. The process was dangerous. Volunteers had to undergo genetic modification that would allow their nervous systems to connect with predecessor technology. Many of the early volunteers died in the process, but those who survived became something beyond normal human capabilities. Rodriguez was among the first successful subjects. The enhancement process changed him at the cellular level, making him faster, stronger, and able to mentally control predecessor weapons and armor. When he put on the ancient battlesuit, he became a one-man army capable of fighting entire enemy units. The enhanced soldiers proved their worth during the liberation of Corvani Prime. Rodriguez led a team of 50 enhanced humans against a Vorthak occupation force of 10,000 soldiers. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the Vorthak were defeated and the Corvani were free. Captain Adams commanded the first predecessor dreadnought, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything in the Council fleets. The ship was called Retribution, and it represented humanity's growing military power. Its first major battle came at the Vorthak mining world of Karanos. The Vorthak had fortified Karanos with orbital defense platforms and a fleet of 300 ships. It should have been impossible to assault with conventional weapons. But Retribution was not conventional. The Dreadnought's main gun could punch through planetary shields with a single shot, and its point defense systems destroyed incoming missiles before they could even get close. Adams watched from the bridge as his ship single-handedly dismantled the Vorthak defenses. "Target their command ship," he ordered. The massive beam weapon fired, and the Vorthak flagship vanished in a flash of light. The remaining enemy vessels fled in panic, but the war was far from over. Chancellor Vex had revealed the Council's secret weapon, ancient predecessor technology that they had stolen and corrupted centuries ago. The Council had spent generations reverse engineering captured artifacts, creating their own versions of the powerful weapons. The difference was that their copies were flawed and incomplete. When Council ships tried to match predecessor vessels in battle, they usually lost, but they had numbers on their side, and they were willing to sacrifice thousands of ships to destroy a single human dreadnought. Jake Morrison found himself at the center of the growing conflict. His ship, Awakening, had become a symbol of human resistance. Wherever it appeared, enslaved species rose up against their oppressors. The mere sight of a true predecessor vessel was enough to inspire rebellion across the galaxy. Dr. Turner made another crucial discovery in the ancient archives. The predecessors had built a massive command facility in the Lost Stars, a station capable of coordinating fleets across the entire galaxy. If the humans could activate it, they would have a decisive advantage in the war. The station was called Haven, and it was the size of a small moon. Its computer systems contained the complete military history of the predecessor civilization, including tactical data on every species in the galaxy. More importantly, it housed the manufacturing facilities needed to build planet-killer weapons. Collins faced the hardest decision of his career. The archives showed him how to build weapons that could destroy entire star systems, ending the war quickly but at a terrible cost. Using such weapons would make humanity feared throughout the galaxy, but it might also make them hated. The Vorthak started this, Rodriguez argued during a War Council meeting. They chose genocide. They forced our hand. If we use those weapons, Martinez countered, we become the very thing our ancestors fought against. The predecessors fell because they became too powerful, too isolated from the species they ruled. Morrison looked around the table at his friends and colleagues. They had come so far from that first discovery in the Outer Rim, but the hardest choices still lay ahead. The galaxy was watching to see what humanity would become, liberators or conquerors, protectors or destroyers. The war for the lost stars was entering its final phase, and the decisions made in the coming days would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the future of every living being in the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Ryan Clark stood in the command center of the Super Dreadnought Victory and watched the largest space battle in galactic history unfold before him. Thousands of ships from dozens of species clashed in the Nexus Prime system, the final stronghold of the Galactic Council. The fate of the galaxy would be decided here. Clark had been promoted to Supreme Commander of all human forces after Admiral Collins took over political leadership of the Free Galaxy Coalition. It was a responsibility that weighed heavily on him, but he was the best tactical mind humanity had produced. His strategies had liberated 40 star systems and brought down 3 council member species. The battle for Nexus Prime had been raging for 2 days. Chancellor Vex had gathered the remaining council fleets here for a final stand. Over 10,000 warships defended the heavily fortified world, including massive battleships built using corrupted predecessor technology. The council knew they could not win a long war against humanity's superior weapons, so they had bet everything on this single decisive battle. Captain Jeff Adams commanded a squadron of new predecessor fighters, the most advanced small craft ever built. His pilots were all enhanced humans, their nervous systems modified to interface directly with their ships. They could think at the speed of light and react faster than any normal being, making them nearly impossible to defeat in single combat. Vector 7 is clear, Adams reported to Clark over the comm. We've broken through their outer defensive line. Clark studied the tactical display. The coalition forces were winning, but slowly. For every council ship they destroyed, the enemy seemed to have 2 more waiting in reserve. Worse, the council had started using suicide attacks, ramming damaged ships into coalition vessels in desperate attempts to even the odds. Dr. Susan Wright worked frantically in the medical bay of the Victory, treating wounded coalition soldiers. The enhanced humans were incredibly resilient, but even they had limits. She had already performed surgery on 50 fighters whose neural links had been damaged in combat. "Doctor," called Lieutenant Sarah Williams, one of the enhanced soldiers, "we're losing too many people. The council ships might be inferior, but there are just so many of them." Wright nodded grimly. The coalition had superior technology, but the council had built their empire over thousands of years. They had vast resources and billions of soldiers willing to die for their cause. Even with predecessor weapons, the war was far from certain. On the surface of Nexus Prime, General Rodriguez led enhanced ground forces against the Council's planetary defenses. The enemy had turned the entire world into a fortress, with underground bunkers and automated defense systems protecting every major city. Rodriguez's soldiers moved through the tunnels like ghosts, their predecessor armor making them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. "General, we've located the main command center," reported Sergeant Tom Baker over the comm. "It's 3 levels down, heavily defended." Rodriguez checked his tactical display. His forces had penetrated deep into the enemy's underground complex, but the final assault would be the most dangerous. The Council had concentrated their best troops here, including Vorthak Crystal Warriors and Zelani Mind Controllers. "All units, prepare for final assault. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for every species that has suffered under Council rule." The enhanced soldiers moved forward with devastating efficiency. Their weapons cut through enemy armor like paper, and their enhanced reflexes allowed them to dodge attacks that would have killed normal humans. Rodriguez led from the front, his powered armor deflecting energy blasts as he carved a path through the defenders. In space, Captain Morrison piloted the Awakening toward the massive Council command ship. The vessel was enormous, nearly as large as a space station and armed with hundreds of weapons. It was Admiral Thek's flagship, the pride of the Vorthak fleet and the symbol of Council power. "Jake, that ship is too heavily defended," warned Dr. Martinez from her position at the science station. "Their shields are at full strength and they have escort vessels on all sides." Morrison smiled grimly. "Then we'll have to get creative." The awakening accelerated beyond normal space, using predecessor technology to briefly exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ship appeared inside the enemy formation, bypassing their shields entirely. Morrison's weapons fired at point-blank range, crippling 3 escort vessels before the enemy could react. But Admiral Thek was not defenseless. His command ship unleashed a barrage of corrupted predecessor weapons that sent the awakening spinning out of control. Morrison fought to regain control as his ship's hull began to buckle under the assault. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, reported Chief Engineer Gonzalez. "We're losing atmosphere fast." The Council had learned from their defeats. Their stolen technology might be inferior to true predecessor weapons, but they had modified it in unexpected ways. Tech's weapons were designed specifically to counter human advantages, using quantum disruption fields that interfered with predecessor systems. Fleet Admiral Clark realized the battle was reaching a critical point. Despite their technological superiority, the coalition forces were taking heavy casualties. The Council's desperate tactics were working, and Clark faced the terrible possibility of defeat. "Sir," called Communications Officer Linda Davis, "we're receiving a transmission from the Lost Stars. It's Dr. Turner." Turner's image appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Clark could see the massive manufacturing facilities of Haven Station working at full capacity. "Admiral, we've completed construction of the Nova weapons. 3 planet killers are ready for deployment." Clark felt his blood turn cold. The Nova weapons were the most destructive devices ever created, capable of destroying entire star systems. Using them would end the war instantly, but at an unthinkable cost. Billions of innocent civilians lived in the Nexus Prime system, many of them members of species that had nothing to do with the Council's crimes. "Sir," urged Captain Brown from her fighter squadron, "we're running out of options. The Council won't surrender, and they're willing to fight to the last ship. How many more of our people have to die?" Clark looked around the command center at his exhausted staff. They had been fighting for 3 years, liberating world after world from Council oppression. They had seen the mass graves on Vorthak mining planets, the slave camps where Zilani telepaths broke the minds of their victims, the genetic experimentation facilities where Council scientists had captured humans. But using the Nova weapons would make the Coalition no better than their enemies. Clark thought of Admiral Collins's words before the battle. "We fight to free the galaxy, not to rule it through fear." The decision was taken out of his hands when Chancellor Vex made his final gambit. Deep beneath Nexus Prime's surface, the Vorthak leader activated an ancient predecessor device that had been hidden for millennia. It was a reality warper, a weapon designed to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Space itself began to twist around Nexus Prime, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled Coalition ships out of formation. Several human vessels were crushed by artificial gravity wells, while others found themselves trapped in temporal loops that prevented them from moving or firing. "What is that thing?" Clark demanded as the Victory shook under impossible forces. Dr. Martinez analyzed the readings from her station aboard the Awakening. "It's a predecessor weapon, but it's been corrupted. The Council doesn't understand how it works. They're just using brute force to activate it. The weapon was destroying space itself around Nexus Prime. If it continued to operate, it would create a black hole that would consume the entire star system." The Council was willing to destroy themselves and everyone else rather than accept defeat. Morrison realized what he had to do. The Awakening was the most advanced predecessor vessel in the Coalition fleet, equipped with systems that could interface directly with ancient technology. If he could reach the weapons control center, he might be able to shut it down. "Lisa, plot a course for the planet's surface. We're going in." "Jake, that's suicide," Martinez protested. "The gravitational distortions will tear us apart." "Maybe. But if we don't try, everyone dies." The Awakening dove toward Nexus Prime, fighting through twisted space and impossible physics. Behind them, the greatest battle in galactic history continued to rage, while beneath them, an ancient weapon threatened to destroy everything. The Awakening fought through the twisted space around Nexus Prime like a ship sailing through a hurricane. Captain Morrison felt the deck buckle beneath his feet as gravitational waves tore at the hull. The corrupted predecessor weapon was destroying reality itself, and they had minutes before the entire star system collapsed into a black hole. Dr. Martinez worked frantically at her station, trying to analyze the weapon's energy patterns. Jake, I'm reading massive power buildups all across the planet. This thing is feeding off the planet's core, converting matter directly into exotic energy. Morrison gripped his command chair as another gravity wave hit them. Can we shut it down? Maybe. The weapon is responding to Vorthak control codes, but they're using it wrong. If we can reach the central control node, I might be able to interface with it directly. General Rodriguez was already fighting his way through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. His enhanced soldiers had carved a path through the Council's final defenses, but the reality distortions were affecting them too. Several of his men had been caught in temporal loops, aging decades and seconds before being frozen in time. General, called Sergeant Baker over the comm. We've found it. The weapons control center is just ahead, but Chancellor Vex is there with his personal guard. Rodriguez checked his weapon and moved forward. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber carved from living rock. In the center stood a crystalline structure 30 feet tall, pulsing with dark energy. Chancellor Vex stood before it, his hands pressed against control surfaces that seemed to be part of his own body. You are too late, human, Vex said without turning around. The weapon cannot be stopped. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then no one will. Rodriguez raised his rifle, but Vex's crystal guards moved to block his shot. The Vorthak warriors were living gemstones, their bodies harder than steel and immune to most energy weapons. Rodriguez's enhanced reflexes were the only thing that saved him as crystal spears whistled past his head. Above ground, the space battle had descended into chaos. The reality weapon was affecting both Coalition and Council forces equally, trapping ships in impossible geometries and crushing others under artificial gravity. Fleet Admiral Clark watched helplessly as his carefully planned formations dissolved into confusion. Sir, reported Lieutenant Davis, we're losing contact with half our fleet. The communication distortions are getting worse. Clark made a desperate decision. Signal all ships to retreat to minimum safe distance. We can't help Morrison if we're all dead. Captain Adams and his fighter squadron had managed to penetrate the planet's atmosphere, but they were flying through a nightmare of twisted physics. Space folded in on itself around them, creating optical illusions that made navigation almost impossible. Stay close to me, Adams called to his pilots. Don't trust your instruments. They can't handle what's happening here. The awakening touched down in the capital city, just as the buildings began to phase in and out of existence. Morrison and Martinez ran through streets where gravity pointed in 3 different directions simultaneously. Reality was breaking down, and they had minutes to reach the control center before the collapse became irreversible. They found Rodriguez locked in combat with Chancellor Vex's guards. The Vorthak warriors were slowly overwhelming the human soldiers through sheer resilience. Rodriguez himself was bleeding from a dozen crystal cuts, his enhanced armor cracked and failing. Rodriguez, fall back, Morrison ordered. Lisa, can you access the weapon from here? Martinez pulled out a predecessor interface device and approached the crystalline control structure. I think so, but I need time to establish a connection. Chancellor Vex finally turned to face them. His crystalline body was glowing with the same dark energy as the weapon, and Morrison realized that the Vorthak leader had merged himself with the ancient device. Stopping the weapon meant destroying Vex, but Vex's death might destabilize it even further. You think you can simply turn off what your ancestors built? Vex laughed, his voice echoing strangely in the distorted space. This weapon was designed to reset the galaxy, to wipe away civilizations that grew too proud. Your precious predecessors used it to destroy their enemies, just as I will use it to destroy you. Martinez's interface began to glow as she established contact with the weapon's control systems. Information flooded her mind. Technical specifications, historical records, and the terrible truth about what the device really was. Jake, she said, her voice filled with horror. This isn't just a weapon, it's a reset mechanism. The predecessors built it to erase their entire civilization when they realized they had become tyrants. This is how they died. They destroyed themselves rather than continue oppressing others. The revelation hit Morrison like a physical blow. The predecessors had not been destroyed by rebellious servants. They had committed species-wide suicide when they recognized that their power had corrupted them absolutely. The weapon was their final act of conscience, a way to give the galaxy a chance to start over. Can you shut it down? Morrison asked. Yes, but only by accepting the predecessor legacy completely. The weapon will only respond to someone willing to take full responsibility for their ancestors' crimes. Chancellor Vex raised his hands, and dark energy began building around him. It does not matter. Even if you stop the weapon, you will still face the combined might of the Council fleets. We will hunt you to the last star. Morrison stepped forward and placed his hand on the control interface. The weapon systems flooded his mind with images of the past, the predecessor civilization at its height, ruling a galaxy through fear and technology. He saw the moment when they realized what they had become, and their terrible decision to end their own existence rather than continue as oppressors. But he also saw another path. The predecessors had left their knowledge and technology not as tools of conquest, but as gifts to help their descendants avoid the same mistakes. The weapons could be turned into tools of construction. The fleets could become instruments of protection rather than domination. The galaxy doesn't need another empire, Morrison said as he began the shutdown sequence. It needs a chance to grow freely. The weapon's shutdown sent shockwaves throughout the star system. The reality distortions collapsed, space returned to normal, and the threat of universal destruction passed. Chancellor Vex screamed as the dark energy left his body, reducing him to an ordinary Vorthak leader facing defeat. In space, the surviving Council fleets found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. With their ultimate weapon gone and their leadership broken, resistance crumbled quickly. Admiral Clark accepted the surrender of the remaining forces and began the massive task of rebuilding galactic civilization. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Admiral Collins, now calling himself first speaker of the reformed Galactic Assembly, faced the challenge of uniting hundreds of species under a new system of government. The goal was not human dominance, but true equality among all intelligent life. Dr. Wright made an incredible discovery in the ruins beneath Nexus Prime. Hidden, stasis chambers contained the sleeping forms of the original predecessors, the actual architects of galactic civilization. They had not all died in the Great Reset, but had instead chosen to sleep until their descendants were ready to inherit their legacy responsibly. The awakened predecessors were both similar to and different from modern humans. Millennia of evolution and genetic drift had changed both species, but the connection was undeniable. They brought with them not weapons or commands, but wisdom and guidance for building a better future. Captain Morrison was chosen to lead the Great Exploration, a mission to chart the regions beyond the known galaxy. The predecessor archive spoke of other galaxies, other civilizations waiting to be discovered. Humanity would go forth not as conquerors, but as ambassadors and explorers. Dr. Martinez established the new academy on the former predecessor homeworld of Haven. Representatives from every species came to study ancient knowledge and modern science side by side. The goal was to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. That knowledge would serve to unite rather than divide. The new galactic charter was signed in the rebuilt capital of Nexus Prime. Every species, from the mightiest to the smallest, had an equal voice in the government. The document enshrined principles of freedom, equality, and mutual respect that would guide galactic civilization for generations to come. As Morrison stood on the bridge of his new exploration vessel, preparing to venture into unknown space, he reflected on how far humanity had come. They had reclaimed their heritage not through conquest but through understanding. They had inherited the galaxy not as rulers but as guardians. The lost stars were lost no more. They had become the foundation of a new age of discovery and cooperation, where every species could reach for the stars together. The war was over, but the greatest adventure was just beginning.